We've been talking about the payroll tax cut fight in Washington, but its effects will send shockwaves across the country. The Wall Street Journal says it could help President Obama win re-election before his campaign really begins, and it'll make sure Democrats keep control of the Senate. Remember, that's coming from Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal. Now, I don't usually agree with those guys. Plus, a new poll shows President Obama's approval rating is up 5 points this month. 49% approve of the job he's doing. And watch House Republicans ignore Democrats who's asked to bring the bill to the floor.
The House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Friday,
Mr. Speaker,
December 23,
Mr. Speaker,
2011.
Mr. Speaker,
Senate bill.
I regret that the Republicans who say they're here to work, we were on the floor to do our work, and they walked out.
The country's paying attention to this fight, and Republicans could be in big trouble. Joining me now is Bill Press, host of the Bill Press Show on Sirius XM Radio, and Ryan Grimm, Washington bureau chief for the Huffington Post. Thank you for joining me tonight. Ryan, let me start with you. How much of an impact will this fight have on 2012?
You know, I think that people are underestimating how much impact this will have, because there are millions of people who, for a variety of reasons, are watching this extremely closely, much more closely than people think. First of all, anybody who's collecting unemployment benefits at this point is watching this relentlessly. They're refreshing the news. They're googling unemployment benefits. They are following the ins and outs of this. By now they actually understand all of the legislative minutia. And at the same time, doctors. We don't talk about this much. Right. But doctors are going to take a huge pay cut for Medicare beneficiaries starting in January, which will just mean chaos for all sorts of people. And then when people notice that their paychecks are smaller come January, then you'll have these 100 million plus people paying attention. So I think that a lot of the Republicans think at this point they can get away with it. Not the leadership, but the Tea Party element of it. But I don't think that's going to bear itself out in reality.
Now, Bill, another thing that I think could be affected by this is that the Tea Party and the right wing's big theme was tax cuts, covering the deficit, tax cuts. Mm-hmm. Now they have lost the argument because they're behind a tax hike on 160 million American people.
No, absolutely, Reverend Al. And I want to go back where you started at the top of the show is absolutely right. The biggest impact of this is not political. It's that 160 million Americans whose families are really hurting right now are going to hurt even more come January 1. But when you look at the politics, this is a disaster for the Republican Party. Look, they have ceded their number one issue, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out. They used to be the party that said, we're all about tax cuts. Well, President Obama gave 95% of Americans a tax cut in the stimulus. He gave 100% of Americans a tax cut with this payroll tax cut the first time around this year. And now the Republican Party is letting the Democrats be the party of tax cuts in 2012. Again, they have given away their number one issue. This is a seismic shift, I believe, Reverend Al. And if you add that to look at Osama bin Laden and Muammar Gaddafi, the Republicans have also let the Democratic Party become the party of national security. They got nothing to run on.
Now, Ryan, when you look at the fact that now the Democrats can run on national security and tax cuts, and when we look at the fact that if you look at this poll, the American people have more confidence in President Obama than the GOP to protect the middle class, 50% to 35% for the GOP, a 15-point lead. I mean, they have really, in many ways, lost their ability to see the political damage they're self-inflicting.
Right. It almost feels like they're trying to lose this election, but their hope is still that it'll be a referendum on the economy, and that the economy, if it's still sour, people will just vote against Obama and vote for the other party, no matter what their problem is with them. I think a lot of what's going on here is that Congress, the leadership in Congress has really driven its membership the last 3 or 4 years, both Democrats and Republicans, by deadlines and by fear. If you don't bail out these banks, everything's going to collapse. If you don't raise the debt ceiling, the global economy is going to blow up. If you don't fund the government, then this shutdown is going to create a double dip. And they're really, really sick of the brinksmanship. There are tons of these Tea Party members who think that they should have just busted some of those deadlines in the past, but they never were able to do it. So this deadline is one that I think they feel like they can break without blowing up the global economy.
Well,
it'll hurt a lot of people, but it will hurt the unemployed and it'll hurt the middle class rather than hurting Wall Street.
But
and
Bill,
the global
how do they get away
system.
with that when hurting? Beside the fact it's immoral and unethical, how do they get away with that politically?
They don't get away with it politically. I see this just a little bit differently. Look, what John Boehner is saying to the American people is your taxes are going to go up January 1, $40 more out of every single paycheck, $1,000 a year. That is a losing proposition. I think these are kamikaze Republicans. We can start calling them that. And I don't think it's that the leadership is the problem. I think there's no leadership. That's the problem. John Boehner is the most inept speaker we have seen in our lifetime. He's letting the lowest common denominator, the Tea Partiers, run the House of Representatives. He makes a deal with Obama, and then he changes it. Makes a deal with Mitch McConnell, and then he reneges on that deal. So the inmates are running the asylum, and I think look, Al, this is going to mean, Reverend Al, this is going to be, I think, Democrats retake the House in 2012, and President Obama, up against the elitist Mitt Romney, sails into re-election.
Well, I think that's a great result. The problem is 160 million people suffering and 3 million unemployed suffering in the middle. We can't afford that.
Absolutely.
Bill Press, Ryan Grimm, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Reverend.